I want to talk to Starman, who's calling in from Arizona. Starman, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. How are you doing? Yeah.
Hey, good evening. I subscribed to your channel a while back, and I was listening to some of your stuff. It seems like you guys are somewhat kind of rationalist, objectivist. Is that right?
That's interesting you say that. I don't know if I'd call myself a rationalist or an objectivist in the strict philosophical sense of those words, because that has a lot to do with how you understand logic in your epistemology, whether or not you think logic exists like as a foundation to everything, or if like your reason should come from evidence, physical evidence, like how you interpret it, like that. I wouldn't know what to call myself exactly in those terms. I would say that we try to be skeptical, we try to be rational, but that's a long that's a long answer to your question.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I called in because I thought you might be interested in the discussion of the process of cryonics, which is the freezing of a dead person's brain in order to revive them in a distant future. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, we've talked about it here on the show. Actually, we've talked to at least one person who is already. We had a caller one time who said that they were ready to like do it, and they were getting the paperwork done for it and everything, which is really interesting.
Yes, I'm signed up to do that as well.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so what was your decision-making tree there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I tell you the truth, I'm not sure that. I think more or less a person who signs up for cryonics has really gone on a life journey, and that journey takes them to a psychological, location or a place that makes them kind of eligible to sign up for cryonics. And very few people are really kind of psychologically eligible, in my opinion, to sign up for it. And I think, so I'm kind of like in a place, that maybe is very different from the average person. And
okay,
so that's why I was, I saw the logic in cryonics, the rationale.
Tell me about that. What you mean by somebody has to be psychologically ready? Because I don't think that's something I've really heard talked about.
That's a very good point. But see, the thing is that I've been reading a lot lately. 25 years ago when I signed up, I started to notice that the idea of cryonics kind of bounces off people's heads. And I didn't see that non-chronicists were really addressing or coming to grips with the real arguments for cryonics. And so I started reading into like anthropology, sociology, and I finally got into terror management theory, okay, and existential psychology. And this is basically a kind of academic school of thought. Have you heard of it?
I don't think I have. Have you, Richard?
Theory?
I've come across a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure how academic it is. It may be fringe academia, I think, would be the best way to refer to it from my understanding. But if you want to give us a little bit more information, Starman.
Well, it's not just terror management theory, but generally in the social sciences and in psychology and sociology, the idea is kind of taken for granted that every culture has a worldview, okay, and sometimes there are fringe worldviews, okay, and cryonics is one of those fringe worldviews. But the thing is that a lot of people, not a lot of people, some people are become alienated from this worldview. They reject this worldview and they turn to find another worldview. Some of these types of people are cultists, and some of them are chronicists. And so what I'm saying is that, I and other chronicists have, or more or less, rejected the mainstream cultural worldview, and we found another. And so that's kind of that's what I mean by we're kind of in a psychological place where we don't observe the death practices, taboos that our culture observed.
Starman,
They don't-
do you
yeah,
mind me asking you a question? Why do you think cryonics is a worldview? I'd never. I mean, I'm familiar with it. I'm not an expert in it, but I'm familiar with it. I'd never consider it a worldview.
Yeah,
Why would
that's
you go to
interesting.
the extent of calling it a worldview?
I'm not sure that I would call chronics a worldview. It's just that chronics has its own subculture, and it's different from the mainstream subculture. And every culture and subculture has a worldview. Okay, how we perceive the world to be, and my thinking is that when I talk to people about chronics, they don't really like to talk about it, and they don't have any curiosity about it. And I find that curious, okay? And I find it odd, and I want to know why. Because, and one of the things that terror management theory tells us, and terror management theory is not a fringe group. Terror management theory is based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning book from the 70s by Ernest Becker called "The Denial of Death." And so it's the people who are the leaders in that academic school of thought of terror management theory are PhDs and professors at colleges, okay? And so it's not by any means a fringe worldview. But anyway, and so what I'm saying is that, for example, let's talk about taboos, okay? And every society has taboos. And the thing is, it seems that what terror management theory tells us is that the fear of death is a central aspect of all human cultures, although the actual fear of death is submerged, okay, and we don't think about it much because we are evolved to have an unconscious mind that suppresses the fear of death, okay, and we have tools that help us suppress the fear of death, and some of those cool tools are religion, okay, an afterlife scenario, our culture, okay, and the things like the Constitution and the military and the police and everything. These things help us help psychologically stabilize us, and but the thing is, chronicists and other people too have rejected this worldview, and so they are not bound by the same taboos that society is bound by, and so we are able to rationally evaluate chronics objectively. Okay.
Without what
you guys, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but without knowing the history of this this field of study and its legitimacy within academia, I mean, I can see that what you're saying seems to be reasonable in some case, right? I think it's I mean, like when you think about human cultures, like everybody has ideas about death, right? And how humans should approach death, what that should look like. I mean, I'm reminded recently of Switzerland, where they have that machine that's been approved for people who want to take their own lives. I don't know the specifics of it. I could be wrong. I believe it's been like approved for public use was the result of these machines. So yeah, I think that's fascinating. The cultural implications behind that, people having their own autonomy over their own mortality and what that looks like for a rational person, like that obviously has a lot of taboos carrying over it. Because there are some people that think you can't go to heaven if you take your own life, these kinds of things. So maybe cryogenics comes down to, or cryonics comes down to this idea that if we are masters of our own mortality, then there's something that's taboo about that, because that's typically dealt in the realm of God, or dealt in the realm of who is ever in control of the afterlife and stuff like that. So I can see why people would have that aversion naturally. I think it does kind of come down to some philosophically interesting questions that people may not be equipped or interested to talk about. Richard, you look like you want to say something too.
Yeah, I'm real interested, because you keep saying words like worldview, and you mentioned things like
that's curious. Yeah.
We're predisposed evolutionarily to kind of these things, and I think you might be looking at this in a little bit of a black and white way, because I've certainly no like major problem with cryonics. I don't think I'm averse to it in any massive way. I don't know all the specifics about it, but it doesn't seem like something that I'm massively averse to. And there were lots of different cultures. There were lots of different ideas about death and the way we approach death. There were a lot of religious ideas. I don't think something's. I don't think we can say something's were this way because of evolution when there's such a wide, vastly wide array of ideas about it. Yeah. You seem to be looking at it a very narrow black and white view within this what you seem to call a worldview, and I'm interested in your take on that. There seems to be some divorce going off between the things that you're speaking about. So I'm interested in you on that.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, and I kind of agree with you in that I don't think that terror management theory and the people who write on that in that field can be completely correct in their theories, because this is such an unknown area that it's hard to say that anything is completely correct. But here's what Ernest Becker in his prize-winning book, The Night of Death, noted. Okay, he was a cultural anthropologist. He noted that virtually every single human culture since that we've ever known of has an afterlife scenario, okay, and that they all have cultural rules and mores and values and such that they feel they have to live up to, okay. And but let me read you something that I did a blog recently, and I'll read you some of the and we're kind of getting away from chronics there, but this is an interesting area as well.
So I want to, we have some other callers we want to get to. We do want to wrap up this call here in a bit. So, like, if we could just stick to just answering the questions from either myself or Richard, just getting to that, I think would be helpful.
Okay. I'm sorry. What was the question again? I mean, am I too black and white and tunnel vision? Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, but I'm just, the thing is that this is this area here of the unconscious and death taboos and why people don't investigate cryonics, such as you guys, why you haven't investigated it.
I don't think cryogenically freezing my body is, you described it as the rational position, but I can think of other reasons why I wouldn't want to do it. For example, I've always wanted to donate my organs after I pass away and have it be used for other people. That's something that could be used in the here and now rather than later on in the future. I mean, not to say that people who are cryogenically frozen can't have their organs donated afterwards, I suppose. But, I think there could be reasons why somebody wouldn't want to necessarily undergo something like that.
Why don't you donate them now?
Well, then I can't be alive if I donate all of them, but maybe some of them, right?
In other words, what I'm saying is that that's kind of a rationalization. In other words, if you knew that chronics would work, okay, I mean, and then you donated your organs, you're more or less ending your life because you're foreclosing,
Well, I think you missed my point, right? I think I would want my body to expire at some point. I wouldn't want to necessarily have it stored somewhere, indefinitely. Or, and maybe this too, right? Let's say that I have some sort of condition that does make me not want to continue living at some point. And maybe with cryonics, the hope is that it could be fixed in the future. But maybe, there's something that psychologically that wants to prevent me from continuing to live my life in some sort of way. I don't know. I don't know if there would be a response to that.
I think the most interesting thing about cryonics for me is just the fact that you get to see the future. I've lived quite a long time, and when I was young, the things like the internet and cell phones and all this stuff that we've got now, this still seemed futuristic to me. I think it's fascinating, and going into the distant future and seeing what that holds is fascinating. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I think there's nothing wrong with Starman's position. I don't think there's anything wrong with Starman's position. I think the only difficulty I've got, Starman, is that you seem to be kind of I don't know how to use it because I don't want to use the word cult. That's not what I'm saying. But you seem to have that kind of tunnel vision where it's either if you don't think like this, then maybe you're not thinking correctly. And I think you should widen that vision and allow the other people have different ideas. Like Dan was talking about donating his organs, and that's a perfectly rational position to be in. Yeah, I don't think anything other than cryonics is irrational. It's a very interesting subject. Yeah. I'd love for you to call back and let's talk about this subject again because it is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
but I think you've got tunnel vision on it. That's the way you're coming across to me, and I don't mean that disrespectfully.
Are there religious ideas or rational ideas that would prevent people from choosing that option? Absolutely. In that case, I would totally agree with you, Starman. But I would still hold the position that there may be rational reasons why somebody would not want to that have nothing to do with religion, and that maybe have nothing to do with terror management, nothing to do with necessarily a fear of death, but perhaps some other kinds of motivations that would prevent somebody from making that decision. But anyway, Starman, I know you probably want to respond. Unfortunately, we want to go ahead and take some other callers tonight. As we continue on. So thank you so much for your call. And hopefully that, spurs discussion in the comments and stuff too. Like I said, this is a topic we've talked about before, but it's never not interesting, I suppose. It's definitely a fringe idea, but maybe it will become more mainstream as the years go on. I wouldn't doubt that it would.